Networking is literally every single interaction you have with any human in the world. Because you're automatically building your network, and you never know if your neighbor is going to be someone who's going to be a big business partner in the future, which has happened. So when we bring authenticity to networking, people can sniff bullshitters. So if you're not authentic, if you're not yourself, okay, some people might not see through you, but most people will see through that. And if you're, kind of all those things combined, if you have an agenda in your mind, if you're like trying to act up something that you're not, those things are much more dangerous for your personality, for your reputation, and just overall, if you want to succeed long term and not short term, those things will definitely harm you.
Hello, thinkers and performers. Today I am reconnecting with my university friend Dovas Zakas, who I dearly value for his immense positivity and energy to appreciate life. Since meeting Dovas for the first time years ago, I've had the pleasure of experiencing his personal warmth and charisma that allows him to connect with people with ease. This, combined with the willingness to say yes to new opportunities, was the fuel for his studies and career. After graduating with a business degree from Lancaster University in 2014, he accepted an opportunity in London from a small and unknown startup called HelloFresh. After 3 years in the company, he has launched a value brand to expand HelloFresh portfolio called EveryPlate. He's been growing the proposition ever since at a crazy triple-digit rate for over 5 years now, and is currently acting as its general manager based in New York. Today we are going to explore his insights and experience to break down the art and science of networking. Particularly, I am keen to learn whether connecting with new people can be taught and still feel natural, and how to overcome fear of reaching out to strangers. Thank you for joining me today, Dovas. I look forward to our discussion.
Well, thanks a lot for having me. It's great to reconnect after 7 or 8 years of not seeing each other.
I agree, and I like that you've mentioned that, because actually the first question I want to go back in time a little bit. We are talking about networking today, and 8 years ago you gave a TEDx talk around networking and connecting with people, that at the end of which you have delivered 3 key messages to the audience about how to connect with people successfully. 1, give before you take. 2, be yourself. And 3, don't be afraid to talk to strangers. So I would like to start our chat by going back in time. 8 years later, now we are talking. How do you reflect on this advice? And how did it serve you?
Yeah. So I also kind of like the opportunity to reflect on my own thoughts. It's pretty crazy that 8 years ago, while still studying, in university, I had some wisdom. I sometimes, rewatch that TED Talk, and I'm kind of surprised myself that, it almost feels like it's a different person. So, good job, Dovas, minus 8 years. Yeah, and maybe we can expand into the story of like what the TEDx was about and why I gave it and what was the context around those 3 tips. But very much so, those 3 things are very important. And networking is it's a term that is applied very loosely, and people have a very different interpretation of that. A lot of people really hate it because it has some sort of transactional inclination. Yeah, but that's how I've been living my life. So give before you take means that you just meet the people, and if they ask for your help, you just help and not expect anything in return. So definitely I do that, and it definitely reaps some benefits. I might share a little bit of those later. In terms of be yourself, oh my God, that's the top thing that lets me live my life in happiness. I've been at HelloFresh for 8 years, and in our generation, our peers being in one company for 8 years, that's kind of unheard of. I don't know almost anyone who's been in the same company for this long. And the reason why I'm happy there is because I'm very much myself, kind of unfiltered, without that corporate mask that I have to, or anyone would have to put on at work. So that allows me to be happy and just be be truly myself. And last one, don't be afraid to talk to strangers. That was my insight from spending a year in Canada and meeting a lot of people that then ended up being part of my journey. In the UK, I practiced that quite a lot, but it was hard to get through people when in London people don't want to be talked to. So that's talking to strangers has to be a mutual interaction as opposed to just like one person talking to the other. But since I'm in the US, it's so natural here. It's crazy how different that is. That maybe not representative of the whole country, but in New York, like you talk to people and they really want to be talked to. So you have all these like chit chat, small talk interactions in the elevator, walking your dog, in the grocery shop, anywhere really, and it's awesome because most of them actually don't mean anything. It's just a way to have a good positive day, exchange some good energy. But sometimes you do meet someone that might change your life. So all those three things somehow I naturally live by them even 8 years after.
Wow, okay, that's impressive to hear as well that you stick to the principles set up in the past. I have a couple of follow-ups, and of course we are going to talk a bit more about talking to strangers and the fear associated with it potentially later on. One follow-up may be about the second principle about being yourself. Can you give a bit more context around self-awareness and how important self-awareness is in executing that principle? Is it important to you at all? And how do you work on that?
Yeah. So I guess when you're very junior, when you just launch your career, you kind of bring yourself into a workforce without really knowing what's good, what's bad. People tell you all kind of different things, very much dependent on the role, on the company, on the culture, on the management. Someone might really tell you things that you should work on when in fact that's your strength. Within those 8 years at HelloFresh, I'm generally known as a jokester, as a guy that tries to bring in humor to kind of decrease the tension in different meetings and just like make sure that people are having a good time while working pretty hard. And there's been reviews that people would give me a feedback, like my management or someone, peers that Dovas doesn't take things too seriously, that he's too like he's clowning around too much. And I would take that feedback and I would try to, work on it. And in general, I would take feedback like very, very seriously. But one thing that I found to be very important and in the journey of self-development and self-reflection is that feedback is very dangerous. And understanding and filtering who you take the feedback from and whether that feedback goes against your instincts and your core, or whether that's more of a impactful change that would help in your career, you really need to go with your gut. And I didn't actually change. And when I was receiving this feedback, I think I was manager or senior manager. And now I'm general manager, which is, 3-4 levels later. And I'm still joking around. I'm still decreasing the tension. I'm still kind of being myself. Except my most recent review was that Dovas never change. You brighten up the room. You make other people more relaxed. You give them permission to be more authentic. The same sort of personality, but like my strength that I was doing before, and I felt like that's me, was actually commented as a negative thing. And now, all these years later, it's actually rewarded, encouraged, and promoted. So it's pretty fascinating, right? That the same thing can be both a negative in some people's eyes and positive. And especially for people who enter the workforce, you don't really know better, right? Like you're junior, you just graduated from college or just had a few years of experience. Like if someone gives you a feedback that is actually harming your personality and harming your core, then you're gonna feel like you're really in someone else's shoes, and that's where that corporate masks really comes in.
You have said a lot of great things there, but to get back a little bit closer to the topic of networking, right? Or like communication. Of course, what you said about learning about the feedback and deciding whether to implement or not, it sounds like for you it comes down to, is it would it alter my core personality or not? And then if it wouldn't, it doesn't necessarily add value to implement. Would you say that's right?
Yeah, if we just bring networking into the equation, networking is literally every single interaction you have with any human in the world, right?
Yeah.
Because you're automatically building your network, and you never know if your neighbor is going to be someone who's going to be a big business partner in the future, which has happened. So when we bring authenticity to networking, people can sniff bullshitters.
Yeah.
So if you're not authentic, if you're not yourself, people will okay, some people might not see through you, but most people will see through that. And if you're, kind of all those things combined, if you have an agenda in your mind, if you're like trying to act up something that you're not, those things are much more dangerous for your personality, for your reputation, and just overall, if you want to succeed long term and not short term, those things will definitely harm it.
So I would like to move on a little bit because I have it in my notes. 8 years ago, you have developed the principles that worked for you throughout the career. And like you said, you were pretty happy with yourself 8 years younger to develop that wisdom. But I want to check whether it's something that has come up naturally to you. I know there is a context and experience that you have used to develop those principles. But I guess the question I would have is, would those principles be based on real life learning, that it just helped you generate them? Or was it more of the learning in a formal manner and the practice of the interpersonal communication skills?
Yeah.
I kind of know what the answer might be, but
Yeah.
it's too great to explore that question with you.
No, I think that's a fair question. I think it would be false to say that it doesn't come naturally, because since I was very young, I kind of had anxiety of not knowing people in the room. So throughout my life back in Lithuania, I would just meet a lot of people, just like getting to know them, just being curious about them, and not really I never really had any agenda. I just wanted to basically know people. And when I came to university, that was very much the same. And then it wasn't really with any sort of agenda or trying to gain from that. I met the president of a company called Aldo, and that was the whole TEDx story. Is that I sent an idea that I thought of without actually asking for anything in return, and not only that, he didn't steal the idea, he forwarded the idea to his vice president of e-commerce, who then interviewed me. And then after I pitched the idea, which was previously was just a paragraph, and then it was an actual pitch deck, he said, you either sell me this idea or you come work for me. And simultaneously, as I was trying to get a summer internship and I was really struggling and couldn't really get a job, this was the perfect opportunity to get some experience in Canada, but also enter the workforce in a route that is completely unheard of. Like we hear other people applying to 1,000 companies and then getting 5 interviews and then landing one job. Here, that route didn't work for me, and then I found my own route, and it wasn't on purpose. It was completely by chance, without having that hidden intention. And once I told this story to other people, I started realizing that it could have been any person in my shoes. You just needed to be basically those three principles, right?
Yes.
You needed to give something of value to someone who is looking for talent. You needed to be yourself and not really just bullshit people. And then third thing, you needed to talk to strangers, right?
Absolutely.
So it kind of came naturally after. So the approach came naturally, but then the realization came after reflecting on the story as I was telling it to all different people. And the TEDx was actually, I was asked to share the story in like a very actionable structure, so other people can learn from it and also find their internship or graduate job in a similar manner. Which sounds like, based on the feedback that I received over the years, sounds like it helped a few people.
Absolutely, yes. It looks like, well, the talk itself, right? It was almost like a framework that, like you said, anyone could be you if you implement the advice well. Or, of course, there's an element of luck and having the right opportunities, but there is some framework that can be followed in those principles. You've mentioned something that fascinated me at the very start of your answer. Anxiety not to know people in the room. Is that something that you would mind like diving deep a little bit into or deconstructing for me? Like, what is the motivation behind, or the driving motivation behind that?
I don't know if there's a motivation, to be honest, but I just don't like when there's people around that I do not know. So that was applicable in almost every stage of my life.
Is that something you would say you feel like you're missing out on
Maybe, yeah.
curiosity to meet others?
Yeah, maybe I have the inverse, FOMO, that missing out on knowing some really fun people.
Because knowing you a little bit, right? And I don't want it to get too psychological. Feel free to stop me at any point. You are also a curious person, right? So I'm almost thinking whether you have this drive to learn and other people's stories and curiosity about what other people might be doing. And it just drives you to naturally connect and reach out to others. And when you look at that from this perspective, that can be a very powerful force, isn't it? To give you that energy to reach out. You are the first person I've met who said anxiety of not meeting other people. That's why I picked it up so much.
I know, it's at Hello Fresh they call me the crazy Lithuanian, because I guess I'm not very filtered, and I'm not very structured in a standard manner. So it's not surprising that I'm the first person we meet that has anxiety of not knowing people in the room. And it's actually pretty funny, because like it's not like a very, like, I'm not stressed out about that, but I feel the urge of actually knowing everyone in the room. And there's no like, I have no intention, or like no, like I've been saying hidden agenda like a few times, so I need to find a different word to say it to not sound repetitive. But I really don't. I literally just want to get to know the people in the room, at work, in class, in my building, like whatever. And and the more people I meet, the more people in common I find. So that's been very, very useful to do throughout my life.
Wow. Okay. Amazing. And do you remember how it started when you first started doing this? Was it literally just you see a group of people and you just practiced and like changed your approach, or was it a little bit more of or maybe I will read a book about like how I can meet more people, because that's the goal that I ultimately have, and maybe there is some tips and hints that I could use and practice in everyday life? Or was it just a pure drive and and seeing what works in everyday life? And be yourself, of course.
It's a very good question, and I'd say that the number one thing that matters is context. So what context you're in. And then second thing is relatability. It's like, how can you relate to the person and not feel like you're interrupting something, or that you're intruding, or that you're like trying to, I don't know, like attach to someone, because people are protective of their space. So it did start very early on. So sometime in high school, I realized that the best way to connect with people in high school is through sports. So I would just spend a lot of time. I love playing sports. So it wasn't that I was like playing sports to know people, but I was playing sports, and as a result, I literally knew my whole school in terms of like people who were playing sports. And then when I would go like throughout the school, and I would go to different classrooms, then the context is that I already know people in those classrooms. So meeting the rest of the classroom becomes pretty natural, and not that like a stranger comes in and like, hey, nice to meet you. So that was like a very basic, school setup. Then at work, the context is also there, that like you work together. So like it's not awkward to meet a new person. And I did know every single person in the office until we had, I don't know, 200, 300 people in the office. And then HelloFresh knows how, like, globally, it's like in the thousands of corporate employees. So I unfortunately lost my personal touch. But for a long time, I did know 100% of the people. And I was the natural connector between those people. And I would also, so one thing is that when I would see someone that I haven't met, I would just say, I don't think we've met. And that's it. And then if I would see that someone is like, I don't know, in the kitchen between two people, and I know that they haven't met, I would literally just say, have you met Alex? And like, no. And then that would naturally connect them. So I would try to do it for myself, and also I would try to connect other people. And that was a very important thing for the culture. Because when you're small and you don't know people in the office, then like there's a big problem of people not feeling part of the big team and feel very isolated in their own team. And then in terms of practicality in networking events or just like events in general, is like reading the room. And you see by body language whether someone is having like a very personal conversation. They're like looking at each other like in a very direct way, and then it's better not to interrupt. And then even if you do interrupt, understanding whether they're like looking like so then you're moving on, and you're not really like talking to those people. But if they're more standing like this or like that, it doesn't matter, like more open ended, then that is a subconscious sign that they're still trying to like figure out what they're talking about, or like they're getting to know each other. So entering that group of people and saying something like so basic, to be honest, it's just saying, hey, can I join you guys? Like I was at a growth summit this Wednesday, and it was 3 people basically. Like it was an open triangle. So like I don't know if I can paint it like this. So like 3 people were standing. So like there was a fourth, basically the last shape of the diamond, last end of the diamond. And I just came to them and I said, this looks like a fun group to join. Do you guys mind? And they're like, yeah, absolutely. And then we started talking about things. And then one of the guys had a new Apple Watch, the one that you track like more activity and that lasts for 3 days. So I called out that, hey, we're Apple Watch Ultra brothers. And he really liked that, and I really liked that. And it wasn't really to do anything, but I just like call out the obvious that makes us similar. And then it's funny because there was another guy that came in later, and the guy introduced, like the guy that I joined the group previously, introduced to the new person as like, I'm a really fun guy, and that I had the best best introduction and breaking the ice that he's heard the whole conference. Something that he's already warmed up to me, even though we met like, I don't know, like 2 minutes ago. And it was, I did the basic thing. I joined the group that was kind of open-ended. I said something that was like very straightforward, and I just kind of asked for permission to join the group. And then I called out some similarities.
So I want to contrast that view a little bit now with another school or approach to networking in terms of more formal courses or so many self-help books, right? How to meet anyone, how to talk to anyone, how to win friends and influence people. Honestly, like a great book of mine that I personally enjoyed.
Yeah.
It looks like your approach was predominantly in the past common sense, keeping it simple, being yourself, talking to people, curiosity to know their journey. On another side, we have that, well, I think it's a sizable market. I haven't researched, but there is some self-help market in helping people to communicate with each other. Do you think, first of all, what do you think of that market? And second of all, do you think it's possible to learn networking a bit more formally and still keep it natural?
Yes. So in my case, I do things in most cases based on common sense. And then I reflect and I see what was useful, what wasn't useful. I do work quite a bit on myself, but I work more not from theoretical point of view, but more practical point of view. That I read a book, even the How to Win Friends and Influence People, which probably has the worst name and connotation, especially if someone sees you reading that book, just like come across as a manipulator, even though you're just like trying to be a better communicator. But then I try to still apply it in my life and see what's successful and what's not successful. So I think that that would be my advice, is that the best training is not really reading the books and summarizing them, but rather finding your own style and just talking to people. So I would just encourage people of talking to literally every single person that they meet in a single day. Not someone on the street, but like you're sharing a interaction for 10 seconds or something. And I would encourage to really like break the ice and see how the person reacted when you said something. See if you can find something that you can relate to, and see if the end of the interaction is something that was pleasant for both people, or one person's like, I have to leave. Yeah, but now I don't think that formal education is needed for this, because you need, honestly, you can read all the books, you can like have frameworks. If it doesn't work for you, it doesn't work for you. So like you have to do it in your own way for it to be natural and for you to be able to continue doing it.
Now I would like to follow up on one thing I picked up. You said reflection. Reflection is quite powerful. It can be a feedback mechanism. You said you are learning from reflection. Can you elaborate more about how that can be used to improve? Because you can feel something didn't go right, and then it helps you to improve. So can you elaborate a bit more on the reflection and learning from it?
Yeah, for sure. So when you talk to people, you can sense straight away whether they're opening up or they're actually like just wanting you to move on. Right? So that's a very good signal to understand what's working well, what's not working well. And the way that I framed the previous question, context relatability, and like simple and common sense interactions, those are things that you can very clearly see. When you say something, people are getting warmer or colder. Yeah. So if you come in without context, people are generally cold, and they feel, it's like getting a cold sales call, which absolutely, everyone dreads. And some of them turn out to be in like 0.1% of those calls become actual, sales, and people are happy that someone called. But that's because there's absolutely no context. It's just like cold. So when you have that context, then it's just the matter of what you say and how you say it, that will clearly indicate it's going to be something firing in your mind that, oh, I should never do that again. For example,
yeah,
I mentioned like people talking to each other like this, and you come into the group and you start just like talking, oh, I met you, and then you can clearly see that they're like really uncomfortable of you being there and talking to them, and the only thing they want is for you to leave. And then you have more of these interactions, and naturally in your head you're forming routes that like you should be more like this and less like that.
Clear. Very simple again. In theory or in practice, actually. So
yeah, you'll have to do an episode of your own self-reflections about having all the different interactions and how you felt.
Yes, definitely. Self-reflection is another topic. I agree with you. So the last point I wanted to discuss with you today is a classic. Is the fear of reaching out to strangers. Something I've probably been building up for the whole talk, because personally I'm also affected by it. Right? It's how many anxieties it can induce: fear of rejection, fear of embarrassment, fear of hearing no. Does that happen to you? If yes, how do you overcome it? Is it a natural feeling? So many questions I can ask about it. So maybe I would just start with a general one. What do you think of fear of reaching out to strangers?
I think that the fear of reaching out to people that you don't know is very different when you do it in real life versus digitally. because I think it's much harder to do it in like in person, because you need to have the context and the right opportunity. Because everyone's trying to, especially if the person is successful, everyone's trying to steal their time, talk to them, like sell something to them, so they have a natural barrier that's going to go up. And I think that's where it is likely that they're gonna try to avoid the conversation or just be very surface level and like will not really connect unless you offer them the elevator pitch example or like alternative or whatever. I'm looking for a word that I cannot find. The equivalent of an elevator pitch for an investor is kind of equivalent of an elevator pitch of like why should they care about you, is the in-person thing. But I'd say that even myself, when I want to meet someone important that is like next to me, someone who is not just like a random person that I've never met and kind of like my peer, I do have my my heart racing, but I do think about like how could I break the ice, and also how could I make it relatable for both of us. So like that same principle I mentioned before, it's still applicable. And having worked at HelloFresh really helps, because HelloFresh is a very successful company, and a lot of people know it. And the fact that I've been there for 8 years puts me in a very unique position to to kind of come across as someone who doesn't want anything out of that person, and rather is there to talk to them as a peer, or as someone who just wants to meet up and chat and not really like sell something to them or anything else. So that's the in person, and I do think that's harder. Digitally, I think it's more barrier mentally for the first couple of times, and you do realize in the end that it's a numbers game. That people are busy. There's just so many different mediums of how you can reach out to someone, and that means also that everyone is bombarded with messages, with requests, with all the different things, that they spend 5 seconds looking at yours. If they don't find it interesting or relevant, they just move on. They don't think about you at all. They just move on. They don't they don't care. So there should really be no fear reaching out to those people. And instead, the best way actually to get through to someone, well, actually both in person and digitally, is through a referral. So that would be a way to completely diminish the fear. Just first finding if someone in your network actually knows that person, and then second thing, if that fails, just thinking that people don't really care about strangers that reach out to them, and just like doing it, and then in the end, there's going to be 5%, 10% of people actually reading your message and responding to you, especially if you have some credibility and you're not just trying to sell something to them. I think that's going to be very natural. And I will follow up with a quick real life example. So my wife, who is a full-time fashion influencer, she also follows this girl, Valeria, who is a very popular personality on the internet. I don't know, maybe you know Valeria.
Myself, not. I would need to
Probably
check
not.
with my fiance.
Yeah, your fiance probably would know. She's a great personality. She has 3 kids. She has like a fashion content stream, and then also like parenting and like family. And they moved to Miami, and it seems like a person that you really relate to and you want to meet. And we were in Miami just now. It's like let's meet with them. Let's just let's no agenda. Let's just meet with them and just have a dinner or something. And I reached out to her husband, and basically I told him like my little who am I, who's Ruta, my wife, why are we in Miami, what I want to like let's just basically have dinner and chat, and maybe we can relate, because we had somewhat of a similar careers in both on the wife's side and also on the husband's side. And he responded saying, yeah, let's do it. Complete stranger. And we did end up having a double date, because his wife was busy, but we did have a lunch with him 101, and like we started an hour for that, and it wasn't enough. It felt like we had so many things to talk about that we were like, shit, like I was actually the person that had to leave because I had a meeting, but that came out of nowhere. It was purely because I was curious about the person, their life, and he looked like a person that I would want to connect. He was also older than me, so like not in his 30s. And it was a great thing. And when I was having that dinner, I actually told him that, like, during COVID, I didn't do it at all. Like, for some reason, talking to people was more of a taboo thing, and it was very hard to be close to strangers. But now we're back, and that was kind of the time when I realized that, one of my core principles, I kind of paused on it, and I just recently relaunched it and started doing it again. So that's a real life example, and I definitely live by it, and I'm planning to do more and more of this. And the fact that I didn't have anything to ask for was something that is probably the most important thing here, because if you meet with someone that is kind to meet with a stranger and just catch up, if there's some sort of if there's something benefiting him or her, makes sense. But if something that's just benefiting you, then that is, how I say, not kosher, and you should try to avoid those things.
You've mentioned you are a bit opportunistic, and you are in general ready for adventure and say yes to new things. But when you are talking about an example in a room when you want to talk to someone, it sounds like a little bit of a preparation to calm yourself down, remember the principle, think how you can add value, think how you can make it relatable, and what's the context. So there's still a little bit of a preparation required from what I hear.
For me, the preparation, I guess, is a little bit in the moment and subconscious. I don't pull out my notebook and I don't write notes. Oh, that person's wearing, blue jeans. I'm wearing blue jeans. Okay, that's one. It's more that I know from my personal experience. That's one thing that I do use quite a lot, not just in this, but in marketing and in management, and a lot of places where I have to either work or spend a lot of time solving a problem. I think of it from my own shoes. I think of it as I am the consumer, and for example, when someone reaches out to me and I read through it and I want to respond, I take a mental note. It's like, oh, wow, this cold outreach actually got through to me. And same thing for in person, is that someone said something in a way that I'm really angry and I don't want to talk to that person. I take a mental note, I should never do it this way. And same thing for positive things. That someone says something positive, and I start opening up and saying things that I normally wouldn't. Like more sensitive things, or more emotional, or maybe some business advice that I wouldn't just give to someone that I just met. And then I'm like, wow, the person really opened me up. Like what they do that was that successful. So it's not really an active preparation, but it's more always kind of being aware of yourself and of others. And that's applicable not just in networking, but when I'm trying to come up with a marketing campaign or ad strategy, I think of myself as a consumer. What do I respond to on Instagram and TikTok? And that's an entirely different podcast. But we created an ad that took 30 minutes from beginning to end, and that ad has been the longest ever running ad that TikTok has ever seen. And that's a random thing.
So I also hear...
There's proof. I got a plaque from TikTok saying my name, my brand. And
that's amazing.
But that's just an advice overall. Completely, that's kind of slightly off topic, but not. Is that you should always see yourself as the consumer and take information, take interactions, take different things as a way to improve yourself and how to do things better.
Exactly. Back to you. Almost like strengthening the feedback loop we discussed earlier, right? Earlier we discussed, I said something and I'm looking at the reaction from others as a feedback loop to improve myself. But also now we are talking about observing ourselves as a reaction to others, as a feedback loop within us to learn from that experience. Okay, Dovas, I'm aware we are slightly over time. We've covered a lot of ground there. So I want to ask you the final question. After 8 years of your TEDx talk, After giving your experience, giving this conversation, would you update your principles? Would you add anything? Would you change anything? Or would you just say those are the top 3 things to keep in life in terms of networking?
Yeah, that's a very challenging question, man. Because in general, I don't work in frameworks myself.
Okay.
So I came up with that framework, came up with those principles because like I was asked to condense my talk into something. And my talk, our session today actually built on a lot of those principles, and it sounds like they are very applicable. Yeah, but in terms of networking and meeting people and not being seen as someone who's trying to sell, but someone who is like more on your side of the team, I would probably add what we discussed, context. Is that you need to really like understand like what's the setting and be adapting to that. Adding value is still that give before you take, or adding value is still something that is very much there. Be yourself 100%, because you need to make sure that people see you as you are and not see the some sort of a different personality that you would if there was a second time that you meet with them, that they will be like, who is this person? That's not the vibe that I got the first time. That's essentially trust, right? Because every interaction has to be based on trust, and if you start the interaction like with something false, then hidden agenda or like being not yourself, then that's gonna ruin the trust. Then I would add the don't be afraid to talk to strangers. That's like another very common sense thing, is that if you don't talk to strangers, then you're never gonna meet the people. So I still live by that. So overall, I would say that those principles somehow, even though it's been 8 years, it's still the principles that are very, very important. And I guess the last one, maybe because you concluded very well based on what I was saying, is that keep things simple. Don't overthink it. There could be fear. There could be like a lot of thoughts going through your head, like overcomplication. Like, what should I say? Should I say this? Should I say that? Nah. People like talking to people. People like talking to people who are genuine. People like to learn about things that they haven't known about. If they don't, then these are not the people you want to talk to in the first place, right? Because like you should be positively charged from every interaction, as opposed to feel like you were just like drained and upset. So yeah, keeping it simple. I think that's my new principle, like across all stages of life. Since I was able to have a pretty fast career at HelloFresh, I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a dog parent, and you see people like, of course it depends on the dog and the kid, but we're really not overcomplicating things. We're traveling a lot. We're kind of adapting the baby to our lifestyle, and he's having a lot of fun. We're having a lot of fun, and there's parents who are overcomplicating things and staying at home and not seeing any action or fun for like years after the baby is born. So keeping it simple in networking is very important, but just in life, really, keeping it simple is the success pillar.
100% agree. Thank you for this conclusion, Dovas. I'm not going to dilute the message any further. I think this is the perfect moment to end. So thank you so much for the time, and we'll talk soon again.
All right, my pleasure, and thanks a lot for having me.
Thank you.